To be the best is great because you're number one, but to be unique is better because you're the only one. Anonymous. I got this quote a few years ago from Lewis Howes, and even if he didn't create the quote, it always stuck with me. And the reason is because I always thought about it in the context of my own thought leadership. How do I share ideas on a podcast that makes me stand out from other personal brands in my industry? Or rather, how do we take the impact, take the message, take the ideas that we want to share with other people that makes them stop and think and say, I never really thought of this before. Never thought of it like that. And that's the mindset I want all of you to have the next time that you're on a podcast. How do you share ideas so unique that are so interesting that it makes people stop what they're doing and listen to what you have to say? Think about the personal brands that we admire and respect today. Gary Vaynerchuk, the CEO of VaynerMedia, Tony Robbins, Brene Brown. These are individuals who have created brands so unique that opportunities run after them, where they get so many that they stop doing the podcast. They say no to the speaking engagement. They say no to pretty much everything because they're flooded with those types of opportunities. How can we create personal brands that are so unique that avalanche, or rather create an avalanche of those same opportunities? So before we get into my 3-part framework on how to do this, which is research, refine, and redefine, let's begin with the definition of value. Chris Do, the founder of The Future, which is a popular YouTube channel and education company, says this. He says, value is tell me something I don't already know. When we share something that we know for certain nobody knows about, that's what gets people's attention, where they stop and they say, I don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know that either. And that's what creates intrigue in the ideas that we have to share. So with that said, let's jump into the framework. Number 1, research. It's a simple principle to get us started. If you want to know whether your ideas are unique or not, the first step is to do the homework, to listen to what everyone else has to say. When I started my personal brand, which is in the communication industry, I studied pretty much every communication expert that were on the mediums I wanted to be on. LinkedIn, YouTube, and of course, guesting on a podcast. In fact, when I was 20 years old, up until the age I am today, I listened to hundreds of episodes of the School of Greatness podcast, which of course is hosted by Lewis Howes, to see what were the best thought leaders in my field, or just in general, what were they saying about communication? And of course, in your case, it's going to be a different topic. It might be health, spirituality. But in my case, I would think about and listen to what other people were saying. So when I had the idea for what I do today, I realized that I had something special, not because I am special, but because nobody else was sharing what I had in my mind. So that's number 1, research. If we want to be the best thought leader in our industry, if we want to stand out from everyone else who shares similar ideas, we need to be willing, we need to have the humility to listen to what everyone else has to say first, so that we know for a fact that we're different. That's number 1. Number 2, after we've researched thoroughly, the next piece to that is refine. And refine means a couple of things. The first piece is refining simply is the idea of prioritizing our ideas. I'll give you an example. Let's say we make a list of every idea we could have in our field. And we realize after doing the homework, the research, the 80 hours, the 90 hours, the 7 hours of listening to other people's podcasts who are in similar fields as you might realize that, when I look at all this, 90% of what I wanted to say has already been said. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't share it. But what it does tell us is the other 10%, those other 10 ideas, no one has shared it. And that is special, because that means it tells you, it's an indicator that you need to try to prioritize that information first on a podcast than every other idea. And you could do that through a couple of ways. One, you can plant those unique ideas and questions you know you're going to get asked a lot, like the ones I often get asked around communication and public speaking. Or You just have a conversation with the podcast host. Hey, I'm thinking about saying this idea and this. Can you ask me a question around that? And most podcast hosts would be thrilled to ask you a question around that. Why? Because they want to hear the unique idea. They want to hear what you have that's interesting, that's special. That's why you're on the show. So, of course, most of the podcast hosts would be more than happy to collaborate with you so that you have a space to share those unique ideas. That's one piece of refining. Another one is an exercise I teach called question drills. So question drills are super simple. Where every day we get asked questions about our day-to-day life, especially in the context of our expertise. So here's the drill. And you don't need to even have a strong track record in podcast guesting to even implement it. You'd literally do this alone in your house. Is every day for 5 minutes, think of a question that you think someone will ask you about your industry and write out the answer to that question, and do that for a different question every day. It only takes 5 to 10 minutes every day. But if you do that for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your industry. You'll have answered so many questions about your industry with only 5 to 10 minutes a day of practice that you'll start to answer questions that most people in your expertise, in your lane, in your field, often don't even get asked. In my case, an example of that is, where does the fear of communication even come from? Say, that's an interesting question. So the first time I got it, I didn't have a great answer to it. But because I kept thinking about it and thinking about it, I now have an answer to that question that allows me to stand out from other experts in my industry. Do the same thing with your expertise so you can start to not just research what everyone else has, but to also refine your own approach so that you stand out on the next podcast. And finally, number 3, redefine. We've researched the topic. We know what everyone else is saying. We've refined our own approach. We've practiced the questions. We're trying out our new ideas. We're prioritizing those unique ideas on a podcast. What's the third piece? Redefine. Look, at the end of the day, not every idea is a winner. Right? It's kind of like an artist. You got to make a lot of paintings to see what sticks and what doesn't. And that's really the key about redefining, is you need to test your ideas on podcasts. Smaller podcasts, they could be friends and family, but you need to create an environment where you're actually testing, experimenting like a mad scientist to see which ideas actually stick. I can tell you a funny story around this. Simon Sinek, of course, as we all know, the master behind Start With Why and the idea around finding our why and our purpose, he's actually known, he says this a lot on podcasts, in his shower, he has tiles where you can write ideas. That's how crazy he is about trying and experimenting ideas. Where if he's in the shower and he has an idea, he immediately goes to his bathroom tile and writes it down. It's pretty next level. It's one that I probably haven't done yet, though maybe I should, but it's a good example of what it takes to actually build a personal brand that sticks, where we continuously think of ideas and share them until we find out what sticks. So some ideas won't redefine our category or the world, but all it takes is 1, 2, maybe even 3 ideas to truly redefine the category that you're in. But if you reapply and you keep doing these steps over and over again, going back to the idea of researching your topic, refining your approach, and redefining your category, that's really where you start to create a massive lead, a massive inventory of unique ideas. So much so that you get to a point where you get on a podcast and you only share ideas that nobody else has heard of. So people immediately gravitate towards you. I'll give you a recent example of this. A guy named Alex Hormozy that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. He's the author of $100 million Offers, as well as the CEO of acquisition.com. Alex has done an incredible job exploding his personal brand in the last 18 months, pretty much, through his company Gym Launch, but also through his media content, because everything the guy shares is so unique to the point that I've never really heard of it explained or packaged in that way before. And that's why he's gained popularity so quickly. But the reason I mention Alex is, why can't you be like him too? Or people like him, where you also share ideas that matter, share ideas that are unique, so that you can open the doors of opportunity to what you're looking to get out of life. And that's really the magic of adding more value and to be more interesting is to audit, to have the empathy to audit and understand the following. Empathy is not the person we are today. Empathy is communicating to the person we used to be. So we need to constantly split test, experiment, try our ideas until we have the perfect episode. And here's the last thought I'll leave you with as we think about adding value. One of my personal philosophies as a podcast guest is they're doing me a favor, not the other way around. They're doing me a favor to be on their show, which means their intention matters more than my own. So what do I mean by that? That means I'm very open about the questions that I get asked. I don't mind being challenged on my own thinking because it pushes me to be a much better communication expert than I ever could be. And that's also about saying yes to opportunities that don't directly benefit your business. I'll give you a random example. I've been on some interesting shows. One recently, I was on a beer craft show. I was on a sports show, entertainment shows. These are shows that probably won't get me any business. But the reason I do them is to ask myself, why do they want to have me on their show? Why is it important to them? How do I draw the relationship between communication and craft beer? How do I draw the relationship between communication and being the CEO of an animal sanctuary? These are topics I've spoken on. But these podcasts challenge me in ways that a normal person wouldn't, that somebody outside of this field wouldn't. So it's also about saying yes to areas that are not necessarily directly related to the business, but are directly related to a more important outcome, which is impacting the world, which is willing to challenge yourself constantly. Because even when you're good, that's my mindset always, even when you're good, you need to constantly challenge yourself to be better. And here's the last piece to this. Sam Altman says, he's CEO of OpenAI. He says that to be in the 1% of any category, that automatically means you cannot do what the other 99% are doing. So I'll challenge all of you. Research, refine, and redefine. A lot of people will hear these three parts, but very few people will do it. So what percentage are you in? Are you in the percentage that will take the notes and walk away? Or are you going to start implementing it tomorrow? Because the people who do will stand out from their industry and create a personal brand that stands the test of time. Thank you so much.